some stencils, which is not something that you typically use a lot in watercolor because, of course, you're using a medium that is really liquid and it's going to go underneath them. But we're going to use to kind of give us just our outline of our leaves, and it's kind of just a little cheat and it's going to save us some time. So we're going to be doing this today, and you can see that iridescent on it. We're going to do this background really loose, lots and lots of water. So what I used was this paper that is a 100% cotton paper by a company out of Germany called Hahnemuhle. They are very, very old paper producing company. They make papers for watercolor and drawing and all sorts of things. So I will leave that open so everybody can see that. And like always, we've got some paper towels and water and salt, and I happen to have another pad of the paper, so we can use that. While you look at this one, this type of paper is actually taped down. It is sealed on all the edges. It's called a block, and you can see that it is sealed on all the edges. You can kind of see that taping that they've put on there. So I can use lots and lots of water on this and it's not going to buckle on me. So is everybody ready? Y'all got water, sprayer, paper towels, paint. You can use any paint that you like. We're going to just be using all the fall colors. I'll put it this way so you can see. My table looks like it's sunk a little bit. All right, give me 2 seconds. I have a big pot of water because we are going to be using lots of water on this. Because I'm left-handed, I have my paints and my water and everything on my left-hand side. I'm going to be using the paint brushes that are the Black Velvet from Silver Brush Company. They're great for precision work, but they're also great because they really hold a lot of water, so when we do this painting, we'll be able to get lots of color on. And I'm going to be using my White Nights paints. And they are a semi-soft paint. You can get them on Amazon. I don't know. I think there's like 1 or 2 Etsy sellers that also have them. So they are not, unfortunately, as readily available, but you can use any paint. You are going to want to use a lot of it, and the reason that I'm using the White Nights is because they do come in a full pan. When you look at them, these aren't little half pans. They're the full pans. All right. I have a paper that I did with all my swatches. Now, this particular brush is called a mop. Looks like a round, but it doesn't have a point on it. It's a little bit bigger. And I have a 12 round, which I think most of you guys have as well. So I'm going to wet my brush, and I'm going to get lots of paint, excuse me, lots of water on the colors I want to use. And I'm going to be using kind of mid-tones for the background because we want to make it not too dark because we want to be putting dark colors around the leaves, and we don't want it too light because we want to be using white as, or iridescence as highlights around it. So we're going to be using the mid-tones. So we're going to be using these browns that are down here, a little bit of our oranges, this Indian red it's called. It's kind of it's very similar to burnt sienna. And some little bit of greens. I like this kind of olivey green here and this little grassy green here. But we're going to keep them fairly transparent, and I do like to also leave a few white spots that don't have paint on them that are kind of showing through. You can see a few of them on here. Oh, like here's a little white spot that I left. You see I left the edges really ragged. We splattered, so we'll get lots of good texture on there. All right, so we can just start. So get lots and lots of water on your brush and wet down your paper. Like I said, this is a cotton paper. If you have a cellulose paper, make sure that you've really got it taped down well, and try and keep the paint away from your taped edges because the tape will lift up with the amount of paper that we're using. Also, if you do use a cellulose paper like a Strathmore 3 or 400 or a Hansen, any of those that are paper that is cellulose, it's going to buckle. So really make sure that it's watered down, or excuse me, taped down very well. You see how even though I have got lots and lots of water on here, it's not buckling up on me because it is a cotton paper and it is sealed on those edges. So go ahead, get everything good and wet. Now we get a little water on my paints here. You could spray them with your little spray bottle from the dollar store. But I'm just gonna put a nice big plop of water on all of these. A little bit on that green. All right, this is probably the most fun part of the whole thing. We're going to just start putting in our color. So I'm letting my paintbrush soak up, and I'm still using the mop brush. Soak up a bunch of paint, and I'm just putting it on there. See how it kind of explodes out? That is because of the paper being cotton and having lots of sizing in it. So it's an internal and an external sizing on this paper, just like Arches has or Fabriano Artistico. So the sizing that's on the paper is actually going to suck that paint into it. And because we're using a cotton paper, it also will really spread that out, and it stays wet for quite a long time. So just pick the colors that you like and go next to each other. I really like these burnt sienna and red tones, and they are in the medium range. You can move them out a little bit. I don't have water all the way quite to the edge because I like that really, on this one here, you can see I like that very irregular edge here that we've got. I think that looks really cool. But if you want something really pristine and you've taped your paper or you're using the block, just go ahead and go all the way to the edge. Whatever you like. Now here you can see I've got a puddle going because this is a cotton paper. It's going to be okay. If I had a paper that was a cellulose paper, it would probably, you're going to get blooms and stuff, which for this I think looks really cool anyway. Yeah, let's get a little bit of maybe some yellow in there. If your paper starts to dry, just spritz it back down. Put some more water on it. A little yellow green in there. So keep in mind too that the burnt sienna is considered a red, and red and green make brown. For this, that is totally fine because we are going to be using those earthy tones, so brown is totally fine. If you were doing something that you wanted to be more clear colors, then you would just be cautious and not use colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. Alright, I do have kind of a big puddle there. And just because it's going to take a heck of a long time to dry, I am going to blot it up. And that's more of a matter of lack of patience on my part. Alright, so if I want to have some little sprays kind of going out, I loaded up my brush, really nice and heavy, and I'm going to just tap it down. Get some splatters. I'm not going to do splatters on the underneath color with the with my metallic paints, because the metallic paints do tend to, the mica in them is a rock, it's a mineral, and it will push away your watercolor paints. So I'm not going to use any of the mica in my splatters on that layer, my base layer, but I am going to on my upper layer as we start working and building from the bottom up on our picture. Alright, I'm going to get just a little bit of the darker brown in there. Not too much because I want to be able to leave room for my values, different values for my leaves, so you'll be able to see the leaves. But I do want some areas that have a little bit more depth to them. So this color, so this is my Burnt Umber. And I'm just kind of wanting it to be kind of balanced. I'm not trying to do any type of a particular design or anything, but I do want my colors, my tones to be somewhat balanced. All right, how's everybody doing? All right, this has a lot of water on it. So I'm going to grab the hairdryer and I am going to dry it. Otherwise, I would have just walk away and just let this dry on its own. Because there's a lot of paint and water with the hairdryer, you do run the risk of moving your colors around, and I like to just let them bleed out naturally, but I'm sure y'all don't want to go and come back in an hour, so you might want to turn down your volume if you don't want to listen to the hairdryer, but it'll just take a second for it to dry with the hairdryer. If you have a heat tool, you can use a heat tool also. So make sure you test it. You see how it kind of had buckled up when it was wet, but now that it's dry, it's flat again, and that is what will happen with your paper. So don't worry if it buckles up. And I like those streaks in there, so we're going to leave those. Okay. All right. And this is just the first layer, so don't think this is the end of your painting. I think that is something that a lot of people, especially watercolorists, tend to do, is they think that they can do it all in one fell swoop, one shot, and that is absolutely not how it works. We need to layer, and we need to be doing a lot of different techniques and processes and glazes and all sorts of things to get it to the finished product. You're not going to be finished right off the very bat. So I'm just kind of rearranging to try and get this in the best view for you guys. So I'm moving my paints over to my left-hand side, and I want my water close by also, and I'm still trying to keep it all in frame for everybody. So first thing, we're going to be using a little bit smaller brush, like a number 8 round. If you have one that does not hold as much water, it is actually easier. If you have the snap brushes, those work great. I'm going to use the black silver again. So I got these pre-made stencils. These ones I got at Michael's. You can get them at anywhere, actually Amazon or Walmart even sells stencils, I believe. And you can be like Navon and take just a heavy piece of paper and trace them and cut them out. You could take a leaf from outside and trace that. You have so many different options. You do not have to buy or use a pre-made stencil. And then I got this set here from Hobby Lobby. The only reason I got this set was I really liked that oak leaf, and I liked the little acorn. This set was like $2.50. I think this one was maybe $5. They're done on a thin mylar. So with the watercolor, it works great because you don't have to worry about the water because the stencil itself is plastic. All right. Do you guys all have a good view? So now we're going to use a little bit more intense colors because we want to be able to see the leaves. We're not going to worry about getting a perfect outline on these leaves because it's still going to soak a little bit underneath our stencils. But this gives us the ability to just use the stencil for your basic shape and not have to draw in anything or trace anything. So I like to think of an area of kind of threes. So we're going to do a leaf here, and a leaf here, almost like in a triangle shape. And I want them going different directions. That way it sets up our base, and those will be the leaves that you're going to see the full leaf of. So I'm going to first use this maple leaf right here. Sorry, I bumped the camera, guys. And I want it kind of coming towards pointing a little bit towards the edge of the paper. And I'm going to use this fairly strong color of Indian red, it's called. It's a bright orangey red. I don't know if you can see that on my brush. I don't have very much water and paint. Don't have much water or paint on this brush, so I want there to be mostly pigment. I'll show you. I've got this mixed pretty thick and heavy here, and I'm letting it soak up all the way up to the top of my brush, all the way up to the metal ferrule, because I'm going to be working with the brush on its side a little bit. I'll make sure I don't have any drips on there and tap off any drips. I think you can actually see that on there. You can see that on the brush. Okay, I'm going to go slowly. I'm going to hold down my stencil, go from the outside of the stencil in lightly, very, very light touch, and just let the paint come off the brush. I'm not going to go all the way to the center. I'm just trying to define my edge. All right, I'm not picking it up. Do not pick it up. Now, with the same brush, I'm cleaning it off, picking up some water, getting my metallic paints. I'm going to activate them, get some water on them. These are the fine techs. This is a gold palette. So you have everywhere from copper, bronze, gold, kind of a champagne-y gold, and then a white pearl. So I'm going to use the champagne-y gold, and I'm really going to activate the heck out of this. I'm going to make sure that I have tons and tons and tons of pigment. So I'm going to work that pretty aggressively. If you don't really, really activate your paints, you think, oh, they're not working very well, or you're not getting good color payoff, and that's because generally, especially with the mica paints, you haven't activated them enough. So I'm going to scrape off some of that extra. I just want mostly pigment on here, and that we can reactivate and reuse. So you see how much thicker that got? That is key. Getting this a little bit thicker. All right, just going to tap off the tip, make sure that I don't have any drips on there. Very light pressure, outside in. Get yourself some fresh paint as you need to, because we are not using as much paint on this. You might have to reload your brush. I'm holding it down, going from the outside in. And I'm leaving the center part. Move my hand around there. I want some of the veining to show, but we're going to go back and define that. All right, so I'm going to gently lift it straight up. And I hope y'all can see that. I'll move it so you can see it better. Can you see that outline? It's just really soft right now. We're going to go back and do Sue's absolute favorite thing and do a little bit of negative painting around that once it dries. So now I'm going to do another leaf. I'm going to turn my paint burr. Let that dry. I think maybe I will do this big poplar leaf here. And I have still got the metallic on my brush. I think I'm going to do this a little bit with a green. And once again, I have that paint quite thick. Very thick. You can see it on my brush. I'm going to try and not put my stencil so it overlays any of the wet part. But for expediency, I'm just going to go right on in and do it. Okay, you gotta make sure that you have a much darker paint than you do on that background. So you want that paint to be thicker, more dense, more pigment, and definitely a darker value. All right, I've got the green on there. Now I think I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the brighter gold from my mica fine tech palette. Got all that in there. Okay, lift it up. There's your leaf. Now you'll see that some of it has bled through. It always does because we don't have a perfect seal and this is a water medium. So don't use this wet part here again. Make certain that you just take a paper towel and blot that off, let it dry before you use that stencil again. Alright, I'm going to use my other stencil now. So this one has some smaller, smaller maple leaf. And I'm going to move this. This one here is fairly dry, so I don't have to worry about going on top of that. And let's go. I'm able to do the oak leaf. The oak leaf I did in a much darker brown, so it'll show up really well for you guys to see. I'm just really blotting that off. So here's the oak leaf. Okay, I want that kind of in the middle. All right. Ooh, accidentally grabbed the Van Dyke brown. That is really, really, really dark. I'm going to use the burnt sienna, or excuse me, burnt umber, burnt umber. All right, burnt umber. Might have a little too much water on that brush. This technique is definitely much more about controlling your moisture, controlling your water. Just using my fingers to hold that down, going from the outside in. I'm not looking for a perfectly stamped shape of a leaf. I just want to have my shapes in there so I can go around them and define them with a little bit of negative painting. Alright, so that looks pretty good, and because we are using watercolor paints, you can still see the colors underneath there. Okay, dry that off. Alright, I'm going to give those a few seconds to dry. You know what, while I got this dark brown on my brush, I might do a few splatters with that. So, more water and paint on your brush. And just get a few, some texture and some splatters around there. So what we're doing is we're kind of building up our painting. I'm staying a little bit away from my leaves at this point. But as we go more and more, we'll be layering right on top of them. All right, if you have your hair dryer or your heat tool out, go ahead and give that a few seconds with that to dry. I'm going to do it so once again, if you want, you can turn off your volume. Can you see how you can really see that gold a lot better once it dries. I don't have any metallic on the oak leaf, but I've got plenty on that maple leaf. All right, so now we're just going to continue to put our leaves on. Now, what we do this next layer of leaf, we don't want to cover up the leaves that we've already done. We want to start them so they look like they're peeking out from underneath. So like if you see this one here, it definitely is not going on top of that maple leaf, it's underneath. This maple leaf is underneath that leaf. So we're trying to get a layering effect, so you won't be doing the entire leaf. You can freehand them if you want, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to get kind of a yellow ochre color from my palette, and I think it is called Indian Yellow, but yellow ochre would work great. Yellow ochre is kind of a heavy sedimentary color. So once again, really layering up, loading up my brush. And let's do kind of just a simple leaf shape coming off of this oak leaf. So I've got lots of good paint, heavy load on that. So I've got one leaf going this way, one kind of going this way. I'm going to make this one kind of coming this way, starting here. Just give it a little serrated edge. A little serrated edge. And just fill it in, just like you would draw a leaf when you were in elementary school. And you didn't worry about how everything had to be perfect. All right, so maybe that leaf goes back over here from underneath. Imagine that it continues there. And then it's got a little stem coming off. All right, I have all this color still on my brush. I am going to pick up some of my copper from my palette, on my metallic palette. Say that 10 times fast. On my metallic palette. And get some, drop in a little bit of an edge on that. Oh, got a little extra on my brush. Let's tap that around. Anytime you have a little extra paint on your brush, just do some splatters. I'm on a surface that I don't care about. Plus this is watercolor, so it's very easy to just clean up with a damp rag when you're done. All right. So I like that kind of coppery color that I've got going. I'm going to do, and I like that a lot for maple leaves. So I'm going to pick this maple leaf right here and do a little maple leaf over here. This one I'm not having touching anything else, so I don't have to worry about the overlapping. My brush was already loaded. So, and the reason that I'm not doing the entire perfect outline of this and all the way into the center with these stencils is because I want all of that really pretty color that we did for our first layer to still show through. I think it gives you a great kind of an organic look of the modeling of the color changing of the fall leaves. All right, lift that up. Kind of a mess on the back side. We will definitely let that one dry before we go back and start to use it again. How's everybody doing? That is the exact same middle leaf that I did on this one here, Sue. It's the same stencil. Alright. I am going to use a little bit of a darker brown. So I'm going to use my Burnt Umber. See, that one's still a little wet. I'm going to flip this around a bit. Let's do... So I'm going to do this maple leaf kind of coming to the edge. What I've kind of done with this, oh wow, that was way too much paint. You know, I can see it seeping underneath there. Oh well. Trying to build this design kind of from the center out so it kind of comes out. Starting in the center and kind of pushing, pointing to the edges. That one's a mess. Oh, not too bad actually. So some of them I put the metallic on right away while the paint is wet. Some of them I put the metallic on when it's dry so I can get some more definition. If you do the wet on top of the dry, you'll definitely get more definition. If you do wet on top of the wet, you will get something like that, where it kind of blends in a little bit more. So this is the gold on top of the Burnt Umber. All right. I think I'm just going to do one more leaf, and then I'm going to show you how to do the negative painting around it to really make them pop off from the paper. Let's find one here that's kind of on the edge of my stencil, so I don't have to, if I use this one here and do it over here, I don't have to worry about the rest of my stencil laying on my wet paint. Alright, I think I will go back with this bright gold again. I'm going to do this one through the stencil. I just want you to see a few different techniques. Alright. Okay, so I'm going to just splatter a little bit on here. Splatter with some of the gold. I'm going to move this because I don't want all of my splatters going the exact same direction. Okay. And I'm going to hit this quick with the hairdryer again. All right. So you can certainly layer a whole ton more on there, but we could be here all day and you could just keep adding and adding and adding, which really does look cool, but we do have a little bit of a time constraint, so this would be our basic. Now, it doesn't look nearly as defined as it does on the original, right? So we need to get a lot more definition on here. We're going to do that with very dark brown, really working it as well. So I'm just going on the edges of my leaves, on the outer edges of my leaves. What I've done is I have wet the area around the edges. And then I'm using the tip of my brush to get some pigment right up to that edge to really help define those leaves. Tap in a little bit extra color where I want it. But because the satin paper, this kind of bleed out, saturate out nicely on its own. So some water. This one here, I think you can see that real well if I smooch this over a bit. I can't help the audio. It seems to be an issue with Facebook. Okay, so maybe just watch what I'm doing until hopefully the audio will come back. So just go in with the brush and lots of water on my brush and just run it along that wet edge. Bleed that out. Now I just have the water on my brush again. Pick up the dark brown. Let that blend out. I'm doing it along the outer edge of all the leaves. So that's why you need to make sure that the rest of it is dry, because you don't want the paint to go where you don't have water. So this is the Van Dyke Brown and the Burnt Umber mixed together. I'm just kind of tap it in. If you try and brush this like a brush stroke, which is something that a lot of people try and do, you're just going to move that paint away. See, watch if I try and brush this in. I end up removing the paint there. I want to deposit paint, so I'm tapping it down and letting the paint spread out on its own. Just a little bit of water to help bleed out those edges. But it's going to dry quite soft. See over here where I did it and it's starting to dry already. All right, I'm going to flip this around so I can get better access to those other leaves. You can always do what's called a two-brush method. A lot of watercolor artists do that, where they'll have one brush just for water and one brush with pigment. Then you're not rinsing your brush out so much. So let's get this one here. I think this will make a big difference when this one gets defined. So I'm just going around the edges with it. Some water. Wow, I think that wind is screwing with the feed. It's really blowing things around, and I'm out here in the country. So my Wi-Fi is a little choppy. So this little area here, so we've got this leaf here and this leaf here, and we've got this little dark area here, and that is called a captured space. And those kind of areas really help to define your shapes. This is kind of a cheat on doing negative painting. Negative painting on its own can be, you know, it's a whole entire field of watercolor painting. There are artists who dedicate themselves to nothing but negative painting. And it can be very, very intricate and detailed, and it's really laborious, where you're doing layers on layers. I mean, they can have 20, 30, 40 different layers going at the same time. So this brush just has the water on it. And just soften that edge out. So I want this one right here. So one of the reasons that we're using this color palette is these colors are dark but transparent, which is exactly what we're going for, because we want to get that shadow in there, but we want to be able to see the colors that we've laid down underneath. All right, this brush just has the water. I'm not putting any pigment down. It might look like it because I'm re-wetting the color that's underneath it, so it gets a little bit brighter while it is wet. But there is no pigment on this, just water. And I can do a little larger areas that I'm wetting down and not worry about it drying up on me because it's cotton paper. If you have a paper that dries quickly, something that's really highly sized, has a lot of starch in it, or is cellulose, you'll have to do smaller areas at a time because it'll dry so quickly on you. You won't be able to get your pigment on before it's dried. So just tap that around those edges. You see how once you get that negative area, that shadow, that darkness in up along it, see how that's blending out just nicely in there again? It's because of the paper. I'm not doing anything. I'm just letting the paper do its thing. Just tap that in, let it bleed. Yes, Sue, water before color. See how it just bleeds out? So now here it didn't bleed out as far as I wanted. I don't want a harsh outline. I want that to blend out a little bit more naturally. Just add a little bit water onto my brush and extend that. All right, I'm going to turn this a little bit because I want to have better access so you can see it. Well, I do that last bottom corner there. Leaves, you can see your outlines of your leaves. Now we're going to go back in with our metallics and do the inner edges with the metallics. So you want to get all of your metallics nicely wetted down. And we want them to kind of sit for a few seconds and then get really good and thick. And you want to work it in really well. So these fine tech paints are, they're a little bit expensive, but I have been using this palette for probably a year and a half. And you can see it's nowhere near being done. It's very expensive, but it's so highly pigmented that you don't need a lot of it. And it really does last a long time, and the color payoff is just amazing on it. You can get them at Blick, you can get them at Jerry's Artorama. There is a great little store here in the Twin Cities called Wet Paint, and for the rest of the month they have the silver black velvet brushes are all 45% off, which is fantastic. They carry the entire line, and they also have 25% off of all of their fine tech paints. So if you are looking to shop locally, I would definitely recommend Wet Paint. They're not sponsoring this video or anything. I just really like them. Been going there since college. Wet Paint up on Grand Avenue in St. Paul. Otherwise, Art Corner in Ely, Minnesota. When I'm up at the cabin, that is a place that I don't miss. I always go into the Art Corner, so you can check them out as well. But if you are out somewhere where it's difficult for you to find good art supplies that are a little bit of a higher level, you can always order from Dick Blick or Jerry's Artorama. So I have a super heavily loaded up brush here, and I'm going to come in the inner edge, and I'm just going to go to the edge and pull it in, edge and pull it in. So the combination between the darker edge on the outside that we just did and this really bright metallic. Now I'm not covering the entire leaf. I know you really want to, Navon. You need to leave some of that other color showing through from our first layer. The combination of those two things are really going to make these leaves just pop right off the paper. So we want to use our lighter colors. So I did this leaf here in the bright gold. I'm going to do the main leaf kind of in the very center here with the champagne gold. And you see how that combination between the two just really accents that edge and gives it a 3D effect and lifts it right off the page. I'm almost doing a dry brush technique, which is very seldom used in watercolor, hence the name watercolor. But I'm just pulling that in, defining my edges. All right, see how that really just popped that up. I'm going to use the lighter, I think it's called light copper, and I'm actually going to use that mixed with the champagne gold, and I want to get a lighter edge on this leaf here. Once again, I'm almost layering the side of my brush down. I'm not using the tip of it so much until I get up into the tip of my leaf. And I want to have a little bit more control. But I'm using the full side of my brush because I want to have that more of a dry brushing technique. All right, I think that I got a little bit too heavy in this area here. So I'm cleaning off my brush. I'm going to dry it just a tiny bit, and I'm going to pick some of that pigment back up because I want to have more of a gradient. There. Okay, I'll do this one here, really golden. Probably a little bit more of the coppery color down on this one here. It is the combination, once again, of that champagne I want this to be lighter. Just on the edges. Get a little definition on this corner here. All right, so I think I'll do this one over here. This one already has a little bit of gold in it from when we first did it, and I showed you how to do the wet on wet. So I am just gonna do a little bit, almost like an outline. There again with that really light champagne-y color. And the stem. Pull that in a little bit. All right, clean off my brush. Just soften those edges a little bit. If I just dampen them, it'll just bleed out. There, I like that, that looks good. This one here, I'm going to go in and also just tighten up those edges a little bit more. Oh, that's a little dark maybe. So I want to have a different value than the background is. So if your values are too similar, you're not going to get the contrast that you need so you can see the leaf. So the nice thing about using the stencils is you don't have to worry about there being pencil lines or outlines or anything like that. So this one here I do want a little bit darker, so I'm going to use that more bronzy color. And that will be the last one that I do. And then we will put in some veins. So I think I'll do the other half here with this gold. So I did half the leaf with the bronze, and the other half a little bit more golden. I'm hoping that my feed is a little bit more stable now. The only thing I can figure is it is a raging wind outside, and I think it is just messing with my Wi-Fi. And you could certainly putz with this all day, all night, as much as you wanted. You can keep adding leaves and leaves and leaves and lots of layers. I want a little bit of brighter green here so I have a little more balance. All right, so lift this up so you guys can see with the sheen. All right, so a few of these leaves are dry. We can put in some veins. So for the veins, I am going to use this little number 4 and my dark brown, dark brown again. Either Burnt Umber mixed with black, or Van Dyke brown, or Phthalo blue mixed with Burnt Umber makes you a really great dark brown. That is a mix that we use quite a bit in acrylic painting. And it gives that brown almost a tiny bit of a greenish tinge if you use that. So this is if you mix Burnt Umber with the Phthalo blue. Great dark brown. Almost black. But it has, you can see, a little bit of a greenish cast to it. So it's great for doing landscapes and things like that where you want a shadow. So now, I'm going to make sure that I have leaves that are all dry, because we want to have a little bit more control. And I've got a couple different browns here. So make sure you don't have any drips on the ferrule of your brush. You're going to use the tip of your brush. Come up the center. So in areas where you want your line to be a little thicker, just push down on your brush a little bit more. And then come off from the center. Do you see how when you go over the metallic, it almost gets repelled? That's why we didn't do any metallic splatters on our first layer. So for this, I think it is okay though. So now when you do stems on maple leaves, they actually kind of come from the center like a pinwheel. Right here, I want a little darker edge. There. All right. Just keep putting in your veins, and you can look at the stencils for kind of how your veins would look, but they don't have to be exact. We're just putting in the suggestion of them. You see how I always put my pinky down? It helps keep me steady. Sap brown looks so dark when you start with it, but it really does lighten up, especially on top of that metallic paint. So for this one I have a little bit more of a reddish color. I just added a little bit of that same Indian red. So we're going to skip where the oak leaf would be on top. So having those veins look like they're going underneath that oak leaf kind of emphasizes the illusion of the different layers. Does my voice sound better? It seems like my feed is a little bit more stable. So this one here is going to start a little bit more towards the center because it's a maple leaf. Can you guys see then? Flip that around. Alright, just one more to do. We'll do that one with the super dark brown. And it's a maple leaf, so we're going to start in the center here, kind of make a little dot. Get a little darkness in that center there, where all of those veins are originating from. All right, I'm going to put on some splatters of gold, just because, you know, why not? So I'm using this little bit bigger brush. It is a small mop, it's called. And I don't want too much covering up my leaves, but I do want them around my leaves. So if you get a little closer to your paper, get a little more control. The wetter that it is, the bigger your splatters will be. If you get them in an area where you don't want it too much, you can blot it up. You literally are just kind of trying to mess it up a bit. All right. I have this splatters literally all over my entire table and my paints and my brushes and everything. If I were working in acrylic, I definitely would be a whole lot more careful. But the nice thing about watercolor, damp brush, a damp rag, and it wipes right up. All right. See how the gold will kind of actually push away some of the color from underneath, and you get some really great texture from that. You can see your leaves better now because they're all outlined in the metallics. And I am not going to do any acorns because those were kind of an afterthought, but I just did them all with the dark brown. I just used the little acorn stencil and the dark brown. And if I were to do that now, we would have to definitely dry all of this. And if I dry it, it's going to push it with the hairdryer. And I don't want that to happen. But you can certainly use your stencils however you choose. I know Sue had mentioned maybe putting a little snow on. I personally don't want any snow because we're going to be seeing enough of it for another 9 months here. So I'm not going to put any snow on, but if you wanted to use some white gouache and put a little bit of snow on, you could even do some snow splatters. Maybe do some different colored splatters. Maybe I'll go back in here and do a little bit of a brighter green. And you could certainly do this on a smaller size, a card size, and just do one leaf would be super pretty, make a very pretty card. One leaf on a card with a little bit of gold would be beautiful. All right, well, I could keep splattering this all day, so I'm going to end it here, and you guys can keep on working. Yours is messy, Sue. Messy's okay. This is not meant to be pristine, layered, precise, super tight work. It's just supposed to be something fun to get some color on the page and enjoy what you're doing. So if you're working on the cotton paper, you can always just let it dry and go back and tighten it up a little bit if you'd like to. Otherwise, I say leave it messy. So have fun. Work on it some more if you'd like. Don't work on it anymore if you don't want to. Do what makes you happy. And I will try again next time. I'm very sorry about the technical issues. I don't know what's going on with that, but hopefully Facebook gets things straightened out and you can always watch it on the replay. I will double check the replay and see if there's any editing I can do to add some more into it. Otherwise, just go and play and have fun. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.